This documentary is about the sensitive issue of rape culture. Unfortunately, the important topics of sexual violence in other countries, sexual violence against people other than women, and other difficult subjects pertaining to sexual violence, rape, and rape culture had to be left out due to time constraints. We acknowledge that these are pertinent issues that need to be discussed, and we are deeply sorry for any offense that this may cause.
Of 100 rapists, only 3 ever see time in jail. So rape culture is more of a society's attitudes and practices and behaviors towards that could either emphasize or tolerate or actually perpetrate sexual violence behaviors. And what I mean by that is things like victim blaming when rape allegations come forward, kind of how media, whether it's advertising or just a person's socialization in objectifying women's bodies, so that they're actually sexually objectifying women's bodies, so that we put a lot of emphasis on what women look like or that they're more of an object. Advertising is riddled with that objectification.
The most current example I can take is the song Blurred Lines by Robin Thicke. No, I really don't want it. And Miley Cyrus gyrating on the floor, it subjugates women to objects of sexual gratification. And it goes on to all kinds of music, it goes on to movies and books.
And it isn't so much that women can't be seen sexy or, in some of those formats. I would say the majority of the messaging that our society receives, then all of a sudden we have a fundamental problem in how all genders view the role women play and then kind of what can be done or not done to women.
There was a study done in Rhode Island where they interviewed 1,700 high school and middle school kids from I think grade 7 to grade 12. And of those 1,700 students, 70% of the boys thought it was perfectly acceptable for a man to force a woman to have sex if they had been going out for more than 6 months. And 60% of the girls thought this, like a man has the right to essentially rape, his girlfriend if they had been going out for more than 6 months. One other thing is 50% of the students thought a woman walking alone at night is asking to be raped. These are kids. This is what they think. These kids they're going to go on to sit in juries and eventually maybe even become perpetrators or victims, and they're going to have these very set ideas of what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, and what it means to be in a relationship.
Masculinity and how our society defines masculinity hurts all genders. It boxes men into behaving in certain roles. It boxes women and transgender folks into being submissive.
Women can report sexual assaults in various different ways. First of all, we're surrounded by lots of people in our community that are mandated reporters. So if a woman was to find her way to a hospital, doctors or nurses are mandated reporters. Teacher, if they reported it to if they were in school. Teacher, priests, ministers, those kind of people are mandated reporters. So under the Health and Welfare Act, they would be bound to help that victim report it.
You could call a rape crisis center. There's a variety of ways. You don't have to contact law enforcement as a means to start to receive help or services.
Once we do become involved in a case, generally speaking, what's going to happen is a patrol officer, one of the uniformed people that are out on the street, will take or respond to that initial report or that initial call.
Metro, if it's a larger agency, you have certain officers who are especially trained in how to investigate a sensitive crime. Smaller agencies don't have somebody who's specifically trained in that, and then you kind of get who you get. Sex assaults aren't necessarily meant to be a sexual act in and of itself. It's a control, it's a power thing. Sometimes the last thing you want to do is talk to a male who's in a position of authority when you've just been victimized as a victim of a sensitive crime.
They collect a variety of information, and they may collect evidence from a scene. They may collect evidence from the victim themselves. It can be clothing, other types of things. After that initial report's taken, an investigator will routinely get assigned. The investigator may end up following up with that victim again. And then from there, it really is a whole lot of things like, do we have a DNA case? Is it a stranger case, or is it an acquaintance-based rape? So all of those things will factor into all that is going to go into the investigations of these cases as we go forward. One of the problems we have is that it's just hard to talk about these things. I mean, as weird as this question may seem, if any of us were to have to ever describe in detail the experience we had around a consensual sexual experience with another person, imagine if it wasn't consensual. Second, the demands on victims, I think, are incredible. I mean, we ask them to remain engaged. We ask them to open up their lives a little bit. We ask them to share and provide things that are uncomfortable to provide.
The kind of victim blaming that happens for sexual assaults, it doesn't happen for any other crime. No one says to a homicide victim's family, like, well, he was kind of being a jerk. Obviously, he was going to get murdered. So when we start using this logic of victim blaming, the victim was asking for it, it kind of fails miserably. If we convict rape crimes of any kind of sexual trauma the same way we convict homicides, this world would be a much better place. But you'll never hear a defense lawyer ask the victim of a robbery, what were you wearing when you were walking down the street?
The simple reality is that there are going to be times when the victim is going to face some level of questioning or scrutiny around their involvement, their actions, their behaviors, their conduct in a given case. And that makes it tough for people to come forward.
We do have a lot of statutes in place, a lot of laws in place that are meant to protect victims when they get on the stand. Like, you're not allowed to mention the person's sexual history, but you can suggest it. And the jury is the jury, and they are going to say that they do a lot of victim blaming. So no one wants to go through that process. No one wants to sit through a trial and listen to her personality and her identity be completely shattered, just because she was raped.
I think there's a number of reasons that there's the disparity. First and foremost is that most women don't report the sexual assault. It's a very difficult thing to come forward to report it, to go through the sexual exam process with a sexual assault nurse, to meet with the police officers and discuss the case. So a lot of them never report it in the first place. Then of those that report it, it's a difficult process to go through the criminal process and go through with a trial in this case, because we're going to be asking them to, in essence, relive what happened to them, and to not only relive it, but relive it in a courtroom setting with 12 individuals listening to it, and the defendant, the rapist himself, also being present and listening to it. So oftentimes a number of victims, even if they do report it, don't want to be a part of that process. And then finally there's the high burden that the state has in these cases of proving it beyond a reasonable doubt prior to getting a conviction. So all these factors kind of chip away at why there are so many more rape cases that occur versus convictions reached.
And people have this misperception that if you're not guilty, that means you didn't do it. No, if you're not guilty, that just means that there's not enough evidence to prove guilt in that situation. So Kobe Bryant, a lot of evidence in that case. I'm familiar with that case. A lot of evidence in that case, and he was found not guilty. So everyone thinks he didn't do it. Well, no, that's not it at all. The jury just chose to find him not guilty.
If in a criminal case we are able to get a conviction, one of the rights that the victim has is at the time of sentencing, they have a right to speak in open court to the judge, address the judge with the defendant in the room, and talk to them about how the case impacted them, how the rape impacted them, impacted their life, and the effect it has had on them. And for some, that's a very empowering moment for them to have that ability to speak in court and to talk about what the defendant did and how that affected their life.
In grade 7 and think that if a woman is walking alone at night, she's asking to be. These are children in grade 7. They're children. They're little children. Where are they getting these beliefs from? Who's telling them this? That it is okay for you as a boy to force yourself upon another individual. So the conversations need to start very early on about respect, about personal space, about equality. To stop making fun of sexual trauma. We need to get a dialogue going so that it's not uncomfortable for rape victims or kids to talk about any kind of sexual trauma. It's going to take a really, really, really long time to teach them healthy norms, to teach them that gender roles are not biological, they're a social construct, and we get to decide I get to decide what kind of a woman I want to be.
Throughout this documentary, 84 women have been shown. Statistically, 21 have or will be raped in her lifetime. Rape culture victimizes all women and does not discriminate. If you or anyone you know has been sexually assaulted, you are not alone. There are many resources to help you that include but are not limited to the police, local crisis centers, as well as the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-HOPE.
Just tell us that you were raped, or tell us the story, so if it happens to somebody else, we now have yours at least documented. Because most rapists don't stop. They'll do it again.